main present. Like it's my microphone. Let's see if it's. Yeah, look at that. Yeah. The sound thing,
What else have you been doing in LA? Well, you went to Bob Baker.
Yes.
And did you get to go anywhere else? Or just kind of.
I did go out. I guess my outings were mainly to the dollar stores.
Oh yeah, there's some good ones. Whoa.
Those are from Daiso.
Oh yeah.
And I bought a ton of clothes. They have little kimonos, they have hanbok, and they have school uniforms.
Wow. Which dollar store?
Daiso, Japan.
Oh. Oh, the one. You mean somewhere else, or?
I didn't make it to Little Tokyo yet, but I went to the other two. I went to the one in Koreatown, and I went to the one that's on the Red Line.
Oh,
I used to live in Koreatown.
Okay.
Yeah.
until a month ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
6 weeks ago.
I went to the end of the Purple Line and
Oh, fun.
to Daiso.
I was on Wilshire, Normandy.
Yes.
On the purple.
Okay.
So do you have buses or trains where you are now?
We do. They're super slow. Yeah, everybody drives.
Yeah.
But they run, and all the trains are above ground.
Oh, that's nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, you get to see.
It's either street level or
Yeah.
on the bridge.
Yeah, I thought about that while I'm in the train. I'm like, you know, they get earthquakes here. You know, if they have an earthquake, you're toast.
But there are some above ground. I mean, did
Okay.
you go above ground?
No, I didn't go
If you
anywhere.
go to the west side, you end up going above
Yeah,
ground.
haven't been west.
Yeah. So did you get to William Grant still, or were they even?
No,
open?
I didn't. To get to the train from the other place is already an excursion.
Right, it's like 15 minutes.
Yeah, so, well, you have to get to the bus and then take the bus to the train from the first place where I
Oh, from
was.
the first.
So I figured I would take the train when I got to
Yeah.
the second place. So I've been, that mainly I went to Daiso. Did you explore the Goodwill near you? Did you see No.
that? I'm like,
No.
one of what was looking at you. Oh, well, you just have to come back with Black Elephant.
Okay,
Yeah. But you know about the Black Elephant, this amazing exhibit that happens at this place, the William Grant Still
Mhm.
Center, and which is named after William Grant Still. Do you know who he is? Yeah. And so every year, except during COVID, they have like a live exhibit, and anybody can submit their dolls. I don't know how selective they are or not. Do you feel like they curate it?
I think they curate
Yeah.
some, but I've been
Yeah.
in it like.
Yeah,
2 or
I mean,
3
everything
times,
is
so.
great, you know, I've been twice, and it's just such an amazing event, and there's always music at the opening, and it's really,
Oh, cool. Once a year.
yeah, and usually in the winter, but I don't know if that's gonna.
Yeah, it's usually January.
Yeah,
So I'll be looking out for that. Yeah, I didn't get over that way at all. So that's the one thing I missed. Because, well, the places where I am are pretty diverse, but there are not many Black people over here.
Right.
So,
there's a lot of Black
I
people
get to
around
where-
William Grant Still.
where I get to how do I get to where the Black people.
It's so surprisingly segregated city still, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's mixtures everywhere, but
Mhm.
predominantly one group or another.
Yeah.
My neighborhood is white and Latino.
Mhm.
You know. Koreatown, a lot of Asian.
Well, actually, people would be surprised. Koreatown is like 40% Korean
Mm,
and 50-60% Latino.
yeah.
And they're mostly in the kitchen doing all that.
Mhm.
A lot of them speak Korean.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
some of the, like the younger
Mhm.
kids,
Yeah.
like bantering the old lady.
Mhm.
Kind of cute, yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice to see. I miss that in LA. Yeah, like just eating at a
Is
restaurant.
this you?
Oh no, I'm just on Spotify, like playing every single version of Down in the Valley.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this is by the BYU Men's Choir.
I
again.
didn't look at that one.
Yeah.
I have a whole list that I made when I was.
Well, again.
Do you want to hop ahead?
Praying.
What else we could do? Down in the, I looked up Down in the Valley, so. This Burl Ives.
Oh, I didn't get him either, so I'll see what he did with it. Yeah,
Like a cowboy song.
yeah. It's nice for like 2 verses, but I have 5 verses, and I don't want to do this for that long.
Yeah. What if you change meters?
Yeah, I could do that.
Like in mid-verse.
Yeah. One of my changes will be to modulate. One of my changes is possibly to put it in minor.
These are all white people.
Somewhere,
Turning it into like a Scottish song.
well, it is a Scottish song.
Did it
Somewhere,
start Scottish?
yeah, somewhere there's a Lead Belly did it.
What's one that you were looking at? Do you know?
Who is this? Solomon Burke. Yeah, interesting guy. Then I saw him on YouTube. He's about twice the size that he was when he recorded that.
Who did he sing with? Solomon Burke.
He had backup singers, but
It started out with some boots and then became.
I don't know. I didn't know him before I was doing this research. But the rest of it is a lot like Winchester Cathedral. Especially this part.
Right.
Yeah. Who's the king? Changes.
So go back to my first thing.
Do you want to test it? Really? Yeah. See if it works. Yeah, that's it. You have started blank for some reason. It's blank.
Probably wants me to sign in again.
Oh, that's not good.
Stop it here, so-
If you pull
Because
up,
I lost it.
oh yeah, it's not open. Was there a different email account?
What else did I have to push to get?
Share screen.
Uh-oh.
One thing you could do is switch between is app command tab.
I'm
So-
gonna escape this
Oh,
because I can't see the share. Oh, that's up.
Try command tab. Get you to there. Is it showing now? Is it this one? Or is it that one? That one has words on it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's the one.
All right.
Okay.
Should I just leave it up?
We could.
What does the main window look like?
Main window looks like that.
How about if I pause share?
I'll just share. Oh, let me. Yeah, let's see.
Yes.
If we do that, there's a 6-second lag.
Mhm,
That's what people are seeing now.
mhm.
Okay.
Can you see if there are people?
There's 2 people kind of hanging around.
Okay.
Hello, people. But don't we want to get the
Officially,
camera here? or-
yeah, we should stop sharing. Get back here.
You just tell me where.
Yeah. Hi, we will begin right at 3. Hi, will this be posted later for those of us who can't watch live? Yes.
At this link.
It's cool, we can do this.
Yeah, you know.
Oh. Do this?
Well, this is a nice one.
Live without, we've been living in Los, and there is water savers, but also
Electricity
energy.
savers, yeah.
Yeah.
That was another reason I got frustrated trying to record because
Ah, yes.
I wanted to sit out in the nice patios and there was the generators there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it is 70 degrees. Why do y'all have the AC on?
Yeah.
It's 10 degrees
LA.
hotter, at least in Atlanta.
Yeah.
This is nothing.
LA life.
It's not even humid. What's wrong with you?
Can you see what's mode is one? Maybe. it's on.
Oh, is that?
Check on.
Mhm.
And it's a very unilluminated screen.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, maybe the heat was on. Yeah, the snowflake is there now.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
We needed this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
Had a feeling. And
Okay,
it's
yeah, we don't want you to
77,
be
no
in.
one-
Oh, you're.
77, that's nothing.
No, but it's for an air conditioner, that's not gonna get it to.
Yeah.
So I can't see what this looks like, but
Oh, yeah, I didn't put any eye holes in it.
Oh, yeah.
can you try it?
My face is too big.
Oh, your face is too big for it. I love these masks you made, Paulette. I could see a whole
Yeah,
chorus of
I would
these.
like to do,
Yeah.
I would like to do that,
Yeah.
but so now I gotta find those water bottles in the
Right, of course you can't sing.
Well, you know, you
You
could
might be
put
able
holes
to,
in it.
yeah,
I didn't get that far with the concept. I started with the hair.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The hair is amazing. Yeah, when I took Paulette to the grocery store the first time, I said, well, I didn't bring any extra bags. It's all right, I use the bag. Okay, now I see what.
Wow.
That's a target.
That's cool. Yeah.
I love it. I love the
bent, it's like
I
a,
love the way the chin
Yeah.
is just part of the bottle.
that's cool. And the number too, the code or whatever.
Yeah, I need to put
It's a little
some
hot.
eye holes in there somewhere, but yeah.
I like it, but maybe like just a little slit or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A bit
just-
less than realistic.
yeah.
Maybe I'll put it in our back.
Yeah, you're welcome to modify it in any way that, please, and there's some more stuff here that I'm leaving as well.
Oh, you're leaving it with us?
Yeah, I don't, but once again, there's room for that in my suitcase. I can get more of these bottles somewhere.
But, you know, if you want me to send it to you.
We'll have to come again.
Maybe bring it to him,
Oh, he'll
but
like it.
just put a freezing hole in it.
Yeah.
He loves dressing up as an astronaut.
Okay,
There's a hip cartoon called Among Us, and it's these little cartoon squishy astronauts with no arms.
okay.
And just like it's like a big pudgy kind of.
Looks like it's almost 3.
We should wind down, huh? Okay. All right. Remember our game plan?
You just tell me when to share this.
All right. All right. Well. Do we'll pull one of these. Okay. Make sure we're on, right? Oh, what happened? Okay, we're good.
All right, hello, everybody, and welcome to Automata. We're here today. I'm Janie Geiser. I'm the co-artistic director of Automata. I'm joined by Tim Zhang, who's our creative technologist, and who will be moderating today. But really, we're here to welcome and introduce Dr. Paulette Richards, who's been in residence here at Automata for the last 2.5 weeks. We're really thrilled to have you here. So Paulette's going to be presenting a talk today. It's called, so we get it right, Shadows Uplifted, African American Object Performance. And Paulette is an independent researcher and a puppet artist, and she is just, she's publishing a book that will come out next year, so maybe we'll talk about that too. But I really just want to turn it over to you, Paulette, and welcome.
Hey, greetings. I have many thank yous to do, and then I will move into the presentation. I want to thank Automata for inviting me to do this residency. Thanks to Janie Geiser for the warm hospitality she has shown in welcoming me to Los Angeles. Thanks to the Jane Henson Foundation for making this residency possible. Thanks to Tim Tsang for handling all the technical details involved in this presentation. Thanks to Bruce Chassé and the Chassé family for sharing information, insights, and images with me. Thanks to the Center for Puppetry Arts for granting permission to reproduce archival materials in this presentation. And thanks to Nate Puppets, who, over the last year and a half, has continuously pushed me to consider the relationship African-American performers have to the legacy of Blackface minstrelsy. And so with that, the title once again is Shadows Uplifted, African-American Object Performance Under Jim Crow. And so we've also been putting a little trigger warning out there so we know that some of this material may be difficult. So what I like to do is start with the breathing exercise so that we can always come back to center if we start to feel overwhelmed. So wherever you are, find a comfortable seated position. If you're in a chair, make sure that your heels are flat on the floor. And then find your tailbone. Is that pointing straight down to the ground? That's where you're going to anchor yourself to the core of the earth. Then find your hip bones. And then take your shoulders and stack them up directly over your hip bones. And then find the top of your head. And there's a cord coming from the top of your head all the way up into the cosmos and down through your spine, down through your tailbone to the core of the earth. So you are suspended on this string. And just float there for a moment and feel yourself lifted. Good. Okay, so now we're going to pair that with the breath. So take your hands and put them on your rib cage at the back there. Because we are three-dimensional creatures, but our eyes are on the front side of our body. So we tend to forget that there's the back side where we're actually round. So in order to breathe deeply and fully, you want to pull the air all the way down to the bottom of our lungs and let them expand in all directions. So we're going to push in with our hands as we breathe out. And then when we breathe in, you will feel your ribs pushing out against your hands. And that way you'll know that your rib cage and your lungs are really opening up. So are you ready? 1, 2. Okay, do we feel a little more space in the body there? Yes? Okay, I'm going to do that one more time, but I'm going to use the Ujjayi breath from Ashtanga Yoga, where we're directing the air into the soft palate at the roof of your mouth, and that makes a Darth Vader kind of noise. And the reason for that sound is so that you can actually hear the breath and focus on your breath and try to tune everything else out. That's really hard. Doesn't always happen. But anyway, that sound gives you an anchor point as well. So once again, remember that you're floating on this golden cord that connects to the cosmos above and the core of the earth below. And then we're just going to breathe out. And with the Ujjayi breath, breathe in. Good. Okay, how's that feeling? I'm going to use Tim and Janie as my guinea pigs since I can't see their audience.
I feel like it's sort of changed the air in the room.
Good. Good. Okay, so now we're in a place that's safe, that's calm. You can find that again every time by returning to your center placement of your body and your breath. Okay, here we go. Shadows Uplifted. So I've taken the title from the subtitle of a novel, a 19th century novel by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper called Iola Leroy, and the subtitle is Shadows Uplifted. I thought that would be appropriate because we will be talking about shadows in multiple different senses, and also since this is a puppetry studio, then shadows and shadow puppetry are a very important part of what we do. So if we can start the slideshow, and we'll go right into the second slide. Good. So one of the great paradoxes of American theater history is that Uncle Tom's Cabin, the most powerful piece of abolitionist literature in American popular culture, was also one of the most pernicious sources of minstrel caricature. First serialized in 1850, Harriet Beecher Stowe's story was adapted for the stage even before it appeared as a book in 1852. The book sold 5,000 copies in 2 days, and sales reached 300,000 copies within the first year just in the United States. 150,000 copies sold in England, and in short order, the novel was translated into 60 languages, and most of that was pirated. Harriet Beecher Stowe did not see the money, but she got the fame. So selling, yes. The audience that encountered the story in stage productions was exponentially larger. So just as today we have a best-selling book, and then when the movie comes out, many, many more people see it. Same with Uncle Tom's Cabin. Michelle Wallace, who is a critic and also the daughter of, Faith Ringgold. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, who is a performance artist who has used many performing objects in her own work as well. Michelle Wallace emphasizes that most Black performers who went on to establish themselves in vaudeville, brass bands, jubilee singing groups, jazz, and musical theater got their start in blackface minstrelsy, and theater companies that specialized in performing adaptations of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Next slide, please. So as I was telling Tim and Janie earlier, there are a lot of connections with LA here. And one of them is the Albright Puppet Players, who were based in Los Angeles in the 1930s. So while John W. Cooper and a smattering of other Black ventriloquists were able to avoid performing in blackface or using blackface figures in the transition from minstrelsy to vaudeville, there was almost no space on American stages for professional Black puppeteers. The few who did find a place on the marionette bridge or in the puppet booth had less leeway than solo ventriloquists for resisting blackface material characters, among them Uncle Tom, Topsy, and Eliza, since puppet adaptations of Uncle Tom's Cabin became as ubiquitous as live-action productions. Writing at the beginning of the 21st century, Michelle Wallace observed that the case of extensive Black participation in blackface minstrelsy needs to be accepted and interrogated, since it means, it seems to me, that there are crucial aspects to the form that have somehow been overlooked in the haste to condemn it as hopelessly racist and to erase all memory of it. Indeed, African American performance of blackface material characters is a crucial aspect of blackface minstrelsy that has been overlooked. Wallace finds that perhaps the least scrutinized source of American visual culture is Black performance, which is constituted by a virtually continuous tradition or series of traditions in music, dance, comedy, and musical theater, extending from the last decades of slavery. The element that had tied all these modes of performance together in African spectacle drama, and people usually you'll read African masquerade, I prefer the term spectacle drama. So all of these performance modes come together around performing objects, specifically masks. Yet blackface minstrelsy and the Jim Crow system imposed a caricatured social mask on all African Americans that denied human subjectivity could inhabit a Black body. Wallace calls for a more psychologically sophisticated reading of Black participation in blackface minstrelsy, focused on, and this is a quote, the relationship of people's lives to the stories they tell themselves about themselves. But she does not consider the Lacanian-influenced feminist interpretation of the mechanisms of the gaze. So she's a film critic, and here she's referring to essays like, Is the Gaze Male? So she doesn't think that that whole theoretical axis will serve this purpose. I therefore propose to develop a reading based on Jung's theory of the shadow that explicitly describes the stories people tell themselves about themselves. Next slide, please. So the story that white working class Americans told themselves about themselves, and I'm focused on working class here because Eric Lott looks specifically at white working class Americans and minstrelsy. So the story that they tell themselves about themselves through blackface minstrelsy was a narrative that literally defined the white self in opposition to a debased Black other, a shadow. Eric Lott's assertion that blackface inspired love through its ability to manifest an infectious sense of joy dovetails with Jung's view that the shadow self can include positive traits the individual is not able to acknowledge as part of the self. And I'm going to go a little sidebar into Jung here for people who haven't read it or haven't read it in a long time. So this concept of persona and shadow, the persona is the outward mask that we, I should have done that a while back.
You're good.
That we assume in order to present ourselves in society in a way that we hope will be acceptable to the general society and people that we interact with on a daily basis. And my example for how the shadow can be not always a negative thing, but just something that's difficult for us to accept in ourselves is when I was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, my teacher told my mother that I was bossy, and I didn't want to be associated with being bossy. So the persona that I assumed was to be meek and quiet, and that, by pushing that into the shadow for a long time, only I could say in the last few years, have I started to step into my power as a leader because I didn't want to be bossy. So, so we all have these aspects of ourselves that our ego thinks is unacceptable, and so we just kind of push that down and out of sight, and that would be what Jung calls the shadow. But I'm talking about this in a broader sense as well, kind of stretching Jung a little bit to argue that Blackness is a shadow for white society in the United States. And that those traits like spontaneous joy and then sometimes some of the negative things that are attributed to Black people also go into that bin of the shadow. So I hope that explanation helps a little more with the young. Okay. So, oops. Love was what motivated the theft of Black performance styles, but embracing the Black shadow behind the performance would have threatened to dissolve the persona of whiteness that working class immigrants adopted in order to navigate life in the United States. So the first thing you learn when you come here is, oh, you don't want to be like those people. So for African American audiences and performers, the blackface mask reflected the persona they were forced to adopt in order to survive. Paul Laurence Dunbar's 1896 poem, We Wear the Mask, poignantly laments this circumstance. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. And unfortunately, in the Jim Crow era, and to some extent to the present day, that mask, the failure to perform that mask can be a matter of life and death for African Americans. So Dunbar struggled against the mask of dialect verse. In order to get published as a Black man, he had to conform to the convention that already existed in American literature of writing about Black life in a dialect that Black people didn't create. And so Joel Chandler Harris is one of the exponents of that dialect, and a number of other writers who were well esteemed in American literature for a long time. And Dunbar, being a gifted poet, when he steps into the publishing world, that's the voice that he had to assume. But it is significant that he chose to describe this predicament in standard English. So for African American performers in blackface, the constant struggle to maintain awareness of a persona mask that represented white supremacy shadow while resisting identification with, yes, I'm grinning, that that's not who I really am, okay, forced them to become highly skilled at simultaneously delighting two different audiences within the segregated space of the theater. I don't know about old theaters here in Los Angeles, but in Atlanta, when you go to an old theater like the Fox Theater, you will find that there are two separate entrances, and they are not used anymore, but there would be an entrance for the Black people to go directly up into the balcony, and then there was the main entrance for the white patrons to go and take their seats on the floor. So the theater was a segregated space. And now I'm quoting Karen Soteropoulos, who says that theater critics often identified where, as well as when, laughter and applause erupted, and white critics were particularly attentive to moments when Black audiences in the balcony laughed, but whites remained silent. These moments made it all too clear that Black performers had told jokes that went literally and figuratively over the heads of their white audiences. Oh, and I haven't been calling for the next slide. We should be down to slide 6 by now. So where are we? Yeah, 11th death, so we missed a few. Yeah, that's Paul Laurence Dunbar. Okay. And yeah, so these are some puppeteers performing Little Black Sambo, which is a book that it was removed from libraries when I was a child a long time ago. Yes. And then, yeah, that I think that's where we are. Slide now, slide 6. Yeah, I just did something and everything changed. Yeah, that was Little Black Sambo. So
Should I keep going?
no, we're good. So Jung saw that there was a danger of the ego merging with the shadow. And that's what makes looking at this history so difficult because it does unearth the shadow. And then we have to be confronted with our relationship to those things. Like, if someone were to come to me now and say, "Oh, you are such a bossy woman," then I'd go back to my 6-year-old self and feel bad about it. And so similarly, when we're excavating this history, wherever we stand on the side of the persona mask, it brings up shadows that are difficult to confront. So that's why we did the breathing exercise before. So we hit something like that, we can center ourselves. Okay. So, but that's the risk that African American performers have taken throughout the history of American theater, between the expectation of this mask, which is not who they are at all, and to be a good performer, you have to inhabit that character, but that character is a negation of your humanity. So at the same time, you are working to somehow humanize that character. And in a space where you have different audiences responding in different ways. So it's quite a tightrope to walk. Okay. So let's pause here for a moment. Do we have any questions in the chat, or do either of you have questions?
Let's just stop for a second and talk to the people for. Sorry, this is clunky.
Are there any questions in the chat, or do people know they can?
Yeah, I think I didn't really failed to mention, just at the very beginning, but yeah, for those of us that are watching, if you have any questions at any time, please do go ahead and type them into the chat. After Paulette's talk, we will have sort of like a round square table kind of discussion Q&A sort of time where we sort of get into it, and we would love to kind of include everybody watching if you have any questions, especially during this time, while we're all together live, but also if you're watching afterwards, to continue the conversation, we would love that. But Paulette is here, and we'd love to hear from Dr. Richards about more on this. And so if there are any questions in the next minute or two, feel free to kind of type them in. I've been sort of monitoring that, and I'll try to sort of jump in. I had a quick question about what you were just saying. Like, I mean, I don't know much about puppetry, but in the world of music, there's like Louis Armstrong, sort of like the always cheerful,
yes,
trumpet guy who's, beautiful world, wonderful world. I wonder. And then you talked about the mixed audience, right? It's almost like there's the color separation, but there's also the separation between even amongst colored or Black folks who had different opinions, right? And reactions of the performers who had to do blackface, and how, do you have any idea yet in your research or experience or stories in how much of a gap or distinction between even amongst African Americans?
So you're talking about the reception of African Americans. I got a great example for you, because we had been talking earlier about our musical backgrounds, and I told you about my grandmother who was a pianist and had a degree in music that she didn't use because she got married instead. She lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I guess this would have been in maybe the 40s or 50s, a production of Porgy and Bess came to Knoxville. And this is an American classic. It's Gershwin, of course, it's Gershwin ripping off Black music, but it's an American musical at this point. So she was excited to go and see this. And she came back fussing about that low-life dialect mess. Her father was a doctor. So she considered herself to be a person of substance and dignity, and this was not what she wanted to see as, classical, American classical music. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to explain why my family didn't do more with the musical gifts that they had, and that was because from a class standpoint, they didn't want to live the life that went along with the performance spaces that African Americans were allowed to be in. Yeah, so they didn't want to wear the mask.
Yeah. Oh, check it there. No questions so far.
Okay, good.
Proud.
All right, so according to Wallace, so we're still on Michelle Wallace,
Hey.
by 1940, to call someone an Uncle Tom was highly pejorative, equivalent to calling someone a white man's N-word. She put the spelling on it, but I'm not going to say that here. So, yet, well into the 1930s, African-American performers employed with the Federal Theater Project were still constrained to wrest performances from the realm of the shadow with blackface characters. So let's go. Now we're on slide 7, weren't we?
Yeah, we're on the Jubilee Singers.
Oh, okay, that actually comes next, but that's okay.
I can back up.
Okay, yeah, if you would, thank you. Yeah. So, for example, in 1938, when Esther Porter Lane staged Ruth Comfort Mitchell and Alfred Allen's adaptation of Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby for the Federal Theater Project in Seattle, she decided to use a Mammy character as the central narrator in place of Uncle Remus. The members of the Negro Repertory Company were less than enthusiastic about the show, and the actress assigned to play the Mammy finally revolted, saying that her mother and grandmother had been slaves and, quote, "I'll do anything, but I won't put a red kerchief on my head." The Federal Theater Project was created as part of the Works Progress Administration to provide employment for theater professionals whose livelihoods had evaporated due to the Depression. Hallie Flanagan, National Director of the Federal Theater Project, instructed all units not to discriminate on the basis of race, so some were integrated. For example, the Los Angeles marionette troupe that started under the direction of Blanding Sloan was racially integrated. Sloan developed a show called Afrique, and that's Afrike, to present something characteristic of the Black members' culture. I have not done any research on that show, and so I don't know how much input the African American performers had into developing it, and even then, their image of Africa would probably have been a very romanticized. But in any case, they made an effort. So slide 8, please. Now we get our Jubilee Singers. In addition to marionette troupes, the Federal Theater Project also created units for specific audiences. So there were Negro units in 23 cities around the country. The Buffalo Historical Marionettes had a subgroup of Black performers who were hired as Jubilee Singers, and so you see them in the slide. Though they were not an official Negro unit, Martha Boykin, so here we are, say the names, Martha Boykin, Ruth Malone, Harriet Ball, Godfrey Totten, Robert Edwards, and Grant Johnson performed marionette shows in addition to singing in productions with the white puppeteers of the Buffalo Historical Marionettes. Virginia Anderson posits that the artists in the Jubilee Singers had some influence on the content of the shows they performed, since one production, and I'm quoting here, depicted the Battle of Put-in Bay of 1813, a historic event often cited by historians of Black culture as a point of pride for the bravery with which the Black sailors fought alongside Admiral Perry. So the next slide, please, that would be the cotton gin. Anderson, and I have 5 slides with my sources at the end, and we'll make sure to go through those slowly enough for people to do screen capture if they need to. Anderson is one of the critics that I'm dealing with in this presentation. So Anderson does not see the irony in the fact that the Black puppeteers' repertoire also included Eli Whitney, The Invention of the Cotton Gin, and The Life of Stephen Foster, biographies of figures whose creative genius expanded the misery of the plantation system and spread nostalgia for a romantic fantasy of plantation life, imagining that emancipation left freed Blacks, and next slide, please, still longing for the old plantation and for the old folks at home. For Anderson, conformity to general audience expectations explains the popularity of the Buffalo Historical Marionettes Jubilee Singers, though she does not identify those expectations as derived from blackface minstrelsy. So the next slide, please. Oh, you just wanted to show that off a bit.
I was like, was this really the lyrics?
Sam, you gotta fix that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's in the public domain, so we're safe.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
Or it's really sad. I mean, that's not cool.
Okay, well, I mean, but, you know, this is a question I can ask to you as a musician. This is our national heritage. This is our national music. You can get this as a ringtone. It shows up in commercials all the time.
It's unquestioned.
Yeah, so do we just, it's like, you know, some other performers who are, you know, currently in prison or dead, and their reputations are shadowed. Are we not going to dance when those songs come up? So when the Fisk Jubilee Singers began touring in 1871 to raise money for their school, they launched a new genre of popular entertainment that blackface minstrelsy unfortunately subsumed. Though Harriet Beecher Stowe published Uncle Tom's Cabin 20 years before the Jubilee Singers craze began, many Tom shows based on the novel anachronistically incorporated Jubilee Singers. Thus, the Black performers in the Buffalo Historical Marionettes may have been recruited specifically to flesh out performances of Uncle Tom's Cabin as Jubilee Singers before taking on expanded duties as puppeteers. Next slide, please.
There's a quick question.
Yes.
Were these musicians from all over the country, or they were?
Which musicians?
The
The
singer?
Jubilee.
Oh, the Buffalo Historical Marionettes, as far as I know, they were from Buffalo because that was the Buffalo unit of the Federal Theater Project. That's a research question for somebody else who has access to those archives. I have not been able to go to Buffalo and start digging. Yes, good question. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So now we're up to slide 12. Yes.
Is this the right slide?
Yes, it is. So Jubilee Singers at least emphasize the Christian moral of the novel, and Anderson sees the Buffalo Historical Marionettes casting as subversive since Black puppeteers pulled the strings that controlled white characters as well as Black ones. She also points out that the version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Buffalo Historical Marionettes Black puppeteers performed, ended with a speech by Abraham Lincoln. Still, the Topsy puppet, and unfortunately the photograph is not clear here, and we have problems with contrast, and the Topsy puppet is very small, but it looks like a little black dot in the middle of the thing there. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I see, yeah.
so the Topsy puppet that appears in a 1936 Federal Theater Project photograph of 5 Black puppeteers rehearsing as Esther B. Willem, director of the Buffalo Historical Marionettes, looks on, indicates that performing in this show would have required adroit manipulation not only of the figures, but also of the psychic distance between the blackface persona and the shadow self. So what are you going to do if you get handed this thing to perform with as a puppeteer? In this day and age, I have had occasion to walk away from that type of character or an analogous situation. But this is the middle of the Depression. This is a good job for these people. And so what are you going to do? Somebody had to perform the Topsy puppet, which I don't think they made. The Buffalo Historical Marionettes employed 200 people, and that included, specialists who made puppets and others who made costumes, so a whole range of roles besides just performing. Benjamin Fissler, whose dissertation traced the history of blackface puppetry in the United States, followed Bert O. State's application of phenomenology to theater studies. Ooh, now we're really, so I always deal with phenomenology by thinking about the Muppet sketch phenomena, do, 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 do. Okay, so phenomenology is the study of our consciousness and how we know that we exist. On a panel at the Living Objects African American Puppetry Symposium, Amber West questioned Fissler's attempt to explain how the object's reality is not merely an extension of the artist's perspective, but part of a tradition that contains its own signifiers, suggesting that this approach oversimplified the relationship between the artist and the object. So what West is signaling here is that these images exist in a context, and no matter how conscious and skilled you are as a performer, and maybe there are some people in the audience that connect with your attempt to twist, shift, break the stereotype, other people in the audience are just going to see the stereotype. So Fissler subsequently turned to the mask as a useful metaphor for the puppet as an identity construct. And I think this is really interesting. The puppet.
mask?
Yeah, so he's arguing that just like a mask, he wasn't referring to Jung at this point, a mask can be an identity construct. A puppet can be an identity construct. Yeah. Yeah, this is deep stuff. Let me find my place again here. Okay, so he is, no, we're still at this slide. So he asserts that while psychology views masks as a way of hiding one's personality, in art, a mask can be an attempt at creating a new personality and a new understanding. Fissler advanced the concept of puppet as phenomenological object as a field for further research. So that's what I'm doing. I am running with that concept. And I brought in another theoretical tool to crack that nut. And so here I'm promoting a forthcoming book by Paulette Richards called Galaxy of Things, which uses the material characters in the Star Wars franchise to explain how puppetry works in a broad sense. So Searles explores what puppets or material characters can do, and she begins the taxonomy of what I'm drawing the phenomenological objects, by breaking their capabilities down into three categories: distance, distillation, and duality. So that was a lot of deep theoretical stuff. I'm going to take a sip of water here, see if we have any questions. Anybody needs clarification?
Can you say those last three words, please?
Okay. Distance, distillation, and duality. No questions?
So those three words are how you sum up everything you just talked about?
No, we're going to get to that.
I see, got it.
We're going to get to that.
Okay, let me see if I've just been kind of posting the links you've been bringing up, sort of sharing them with the community, but we haven't had any other questions yet. But this is great, yeah, please.
Okay, so are you all on the page with me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't lost you yet.
No, we're still here.
I really like this idea of the phenomenology of puppets. After spending 30 years with puppets, bring myself another key.
Yeah.
It's, very exciting.
Good. So that's Benjamin Fisler and Amber West and Colette Searles, and I'm just building on what they do.
Sorry, can you, I'm new to those names. Benjamin
Fisler.
F-I-S.
Yes. Yes, he wrote an excellent dissertation on blackface puppetry.
Okay.
It should be published, so let's shout him out and hope that he gets a chance to publish that as a book one day, but it is available, and that's listed in my source slides,
Okay.
Oh,
but
okay.
you can download that
Right.
and read it.
So there's Colette Searles, Benjamin
Fisler and third person.
third one.
Oh, Amber West. Amber West. Mhm.
Thank you.
And so at the end of this, there will be a source slide.
There's
People will be
5
able to-
source slides, so we need to scroll slowly through them at the end so people
Right.
can do screen capture.
Right, fantastic.
Mhm.
For instance, I didn't even know about the Buffalo Historic Marionettes. You know,
Right.
there's- The history of puppetry in this country just has layers and layers, and I bet the LA Public Library would be a good source for the Blanding Sloan research, so.
Mhm.
maybe
Yeah, see?
I'll
See?
open that up today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so here we go, starting with distance. Searles sees a continuum between actors playing human characters and puppeteers manipulating material characters. She notes that an actor may wear makeup and prosthetics to assist in creating a human character, but that performing in makeup does not shade into the realm of material characters unless the character is a, quote, concealed human, semi-human, or non-human. So if you think about the Star Wars universe, then we have all of those types of characters, and she details that in her forthcoming book. Searles acknowledges that the distance between performer and performed material is both practical and figurative because the material character presented in the performance is ontologically different from the human actor that animates it. Oh God, now we have another one of those words, phenomenology, ontology. What's she talking about? Ontology is the study of how do we know what's real.
Big category right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Very
okay.
yes.
So I want to use Searle's discussion of distance to argue that blackface minstrelsy is a form of masking, haha, I connected with Fisler, or material performance, because blackface served to mark blacks as belonging to a category ontologically distinct from human. In short, I'm adding subhuman to Searle's list. Masking in blackface reassured white audiences that they were hierarchically distinct from blacks. When black performers worked in blackface, however, they were keenly aware of the ontological distance between the stereotypical caricatures they animated and their own humanity. Where white performers used blackface to exaggerate the fictive distance between whiteness and subhuman blacks, black performers used blackface to collapse the distance between the blackface mask and their own humanity. This is why object performance is such a powerful mode of resistance to the objectification of black bodies. So the only way that these performers could get on stage was to wear the minstrel mask. But once they are on stage, they do have an opportunity to shift how the audience sees Black people, and that's what they consistently did throughout American theater history. Another excellent source on this topic is Donald Bogle's book, Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks, which is a history of the stereotypical roles that African Americans have traditionally played in film. And he traces a progression from people getting in their toe in the door, playing these very flat, stereotypical characters, and gradually humanizing them. And also, yeah, I won't call the other source right now. This is not in my head.
Go for it.
No, I can't remember it. That's the problem. Yeah, but that's a good one, and it'll come to me later. So next slide, slide 13.
This is great, by the way.
Oh,
Keep
thank you.
going, yeah.
Okay, I also want to apply Searle's analysis of digital characters as an example of distance in material performance. So I'm, broad raft puppetry. I'm going to take digital characters as a form of puppetry because particularly in this Jim Crow era that we're talking about, Black artists are manipulating silhouettes in a way that I see as material performance also. And the specific example I have in mind is Josephine Baker. If anyone has seen the film Zuzu, there is a scene where she is just playing with her shadow in the spotlight in a vacant theater. And I'm going to argue that the shadows she's casting on the one hand are two-dimensional stereotypes of the eroticized exotic woman of color that the white audience expected to see in her. But in the composition of the shot, where you see the shadow and her own body in the foreground, then that distance reminds you that there's an actual human person creating this image that is not real. So performers like Josephine Baker have used silhouettes to evoke the two-dimensional stereotypes projected onto the Black body, while simultaneously seeking to explode stereotypical caricature by revealing its distance from the actual Black body or bodies casting the shadows. Thus, Baker's use of the Black body as a performing object manipulates the distance between two-dimensional and three-dimensional representation to parody and disrupt the ontological distance the hegemonic order seeks to impose between the objectified Black body and humanness. And then we can argue about how successful she was in that, because, as I said earlier, given the context in which these images exist, some members of the audience are always only going to see the caricature. So the next slide, yeah, you're on it.
I was just looking
read all the
at what is here below, were those.
Yeah, we're getting to that. Okay. Oh, sorry, no, 13, let's stay on Nancy Green. Sorry, yes, okay. Another measure Searles applies in her discussion of material characters and distance is the degree to which the character remains evocative even when the material is separated from the actor's body. So in her book, she talks about how Darth Vader's mask, is it Darth Vader or the younger guy? He takes the mask off and then the mask is still doing its thing and then he puts it back on and yeah. So the mask functions as a material character, whether the actor is inhabiting it or not. So I am arguing that blackface material characters continue to perform their ontological role of demarcating the distance between Blacks and humans, whether they are animated on stage or sitting on a shelf in the kitchen. The Aunt Jemima cookie jar, or the image of Aunt Jemima on the syrup label, impresses the same message on those around it as Nancy Green cooking and serving pancakes while performing the role of Aunt Jemima at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893. So I had seen this particular ad before, and it's always been in a poor resolution image, and I didn't realize that that was actually a photograph of Nancy Green. And so, yeah, there. So you can see how the presentation there conflates her with this caricatured minstrel image, even though she's a person. And then, as I said, there were many connections with Los Angeles as I was preparing this, and I don't have an image because I was trying to stick to things that are in the public domain, but another actress who embodied Aunt Jemima is Aileen Lewis, who functioned as one of Disneyland's first walk-around characters. She performed at Aunt Jemima's Pancake House from 1957 to 1964. That restaurant subsequently was renamed Aunt Jemima's Kitchen, and it was a fixture in Frontierland until it closed in 1970. So I'm, like I said, pushing the argument that Aunt Jemima was a walk-around character, like wearing
Mickey
the
Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. Yeah, and that people would take pictures with her and interact with her in much the same way as the other material characters in the park. Okay, great. So far, so good. Questions, comments?
Pull this on.
You want to pull it on? Okay.
You want to risk it? Disney's got lots of lawyers.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah, I didn't really know that Aunt Jemima had been performed in that way, too, you know. And that Disney, who had nothing to do with the company that made the pancakes and the syrup, right, just expropriated her? Do you think they had to buy that?
They needed sponsors for the park, and so the company was willing to pay to be in that space.
God. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next category is distillation. Searles examines the process of building material characters as one of elimination, in which the artist seeks to express a powerful truth through abstraction. Material characters can achieve this goal through exaggeration of a specific trait or traits. Blackface minstrel caricatures epitomize the one-dimensionality achieved through this type of distillation. At the most fundamental level, object performance distills material characters down to breath and stillness in order to create the illusion of animation. Blackface material characters exaggerate the putative non-humanity of Black people by artificially separating the visual and auditory representation of Black experience. White performers of Blackface material characters are ontologically engaged in an act of racial ventriloquism that treats the character as a performing object, whether it is a puppet or a mask of burnt cork superimposed on the performer's white skin. Even when the script places stylized dialect in the character's mouth, a performer who has what Frantz Fanon termed l'expérience vécue du noir, or the lived experience of Blackness, can reconcile the separation between sound and image by giving the character an authentic voice. And that's where a lot of the humor that connects with the Black audience in the balcony and goes by the white audience on the floor comes from, because they can hear the authenticity in the voice. Searles highlights distillation in material performance as a means of accentuating the essential universal struggle to be alive. Black performers animating Blackface material characters shade this distillation by reminding audiences that we all struggle to drop our social masks and embrace our full humanity. Okay, questions, comments?
Well, how much latitude did they have, say, in working with a white director?
Very little.
Yeah, so it all had to be kind of like a little under the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you think about people touring the Deep South, where somebody taking something that you said the wrong way, you will be a marionette dancing at the end of the lynch rope.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a very fine line to walk.
Mm.
You look like you're formulating a question, Tim.
It's not quite there yet, but
Okay.
I'm taking it in. Yeah, I'm trying to transcribe what you're
Mhm.
talking about and pulling some links and
Mhm.
kind of hitting me. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and we talked earlier about Bruce Lee.
Yes.
It's the same
Mhm.
issue that he
Yeah.
had playing in the Green Hornet.
Yes, that's what he fought against. I
Mhm.
mean, he had a million movies in Hong Kong. You know, he had like, all the
Mhm.
a lot of Asian actors. Yeah, who were they're only martial artists.
Mhm.
You could get a girl if you could beat up 500 guys.
Yes.
With your bare hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the white girl will give you a little peck. Oh yeah, I'm the man.
Yeah.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean, and
Yeah.
it is a stereotype.
Yeah.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, is
Mhm.
another one.
Oh,
that-
Yeah.
Mickey Rooney.
Mhm.
Yeah, not cool. Yeah, a family friend of ours is actually Angry Asian Man.
Okay, oh,
Have you
yes.
heard about that?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I just got it from him mostly, but just the ongoing generations.
Yeah.
How Asians were portrayed,
Mhm.
in the cinema,
Yeah.
or theater places, and there's
Yeah, so there's yellow face, just like in the
yeah,
black.
yes, very much.
Yeah,
Yep,
and,
yep,
and,
yep.
and so that
Yeah.
Breakfast at Tiffany's is a white actor in yellow face.
Right.
But Bruce Lee, who's already a movie star in Hong
Yes.
Kong, comes to the United States, only way he can get on screen is to be a houseboy.
Yeah.
In Asia, they called it the Kato show. He was the
Yeah,
star of the
that's
show,
right,
but
right.
he's the servant in the United States.
Yeah.
And yet, through his performance, he was able to humanize that character
That's right.
and change the way that people perceived Asians, especially Asian men.
Yeah, that was huge. That was very huge. Yeah, and I think, and I love how, for him, I guess it was just, with so many bad things about America, but I think one good thing about that was, there was an acceptance to Bruce Lee, first because he was so good and he was so charming and all that, but also just there is a sense of desire for, openness and having what Black people have gone through for so many years, and then kind of, it was sort of boiling, under the surface a little bit, and then in from our vantage point or whatever we call we Asians, I wasn't even there, but like just I think Bruce Lee took on students. Yeah,
Yes.
like I'm losing my words.
Kareem
Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar.
Abdul-Jabbar, yeah, of course. But also just people of different, like Asians as well. Like Kung Fu people don't take on Japanese
Right.
people who study karate or whatnot. And so his whole thing was, Jeet Kune Do. And it was-
To open that up.
yeah. And so the Chinese community was very like, no. And actually Bruce Lee's teacher, also did that a little bit. And so it kind of opened up. So maybe generations, there's something about that. And I wonder what's the legacy of, I mean, this is not even a direct comparison, but just to throw the ball back on, the court of this, the talk, like the legacy of Aunt Jemima, like what came, I mean, obviously it was terrible but like, I wonder if there's any like studies of how, like, did that spark anything specifically maybe in the puppet world or theater or whatnot in this kind of, I'm fishing here.
Yeah.
So like,
Okay.
you know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I know what you're trying to
wonder-
get at. So
yeah.
we have these characters. We have Fu Manchu. We have Aunt Jemima.
Right.
On the one hand, they're inescapable.
Right.
On the other hand, because the lineage comes through those characters, as a contemporary performer, what do you do with that stuff?
Right.
Yeah, and so how can you be an Asian superstar movie lead without being a martial artist, or if you are going to be a martial artist, and we're right next door to the restaurant where Jackie Chan shot
Yeah.
Rush Hour, was it, right?
Yeah.
If you are going to bring that in, how do you do that in a way that, you know, isn't reduced to what Saturday Night Live did with those things? And so when I gave my shout out to Nate Puppets earlier, what we talk about, you know, most Mondays is how can he work with those characters? Is it possible to work with those characters? He builds these kind of puppets. And then can he show them to a general audience, or does that need to be some secret thing that he only invites Black people to see? So these are all questions, and I will, you know, say a little bit more about my relationship to this stuff when I get through this last theoretical section, which is duality.
Ooh.
So here we go.
Let's go.
So previously, I have combined W.E.B. Du Bois's double consciousness and Steve Tillis' concept of double vision. Tillis is a puppet theorist. To posit, that's Tillis.
Sorry, what was the first name?
Steve.
Before Steve.
W.E.B. Du Bois,
Oh,
The Souls of Black
yes,
Folks.
yes, yes.
Okay. So I'm combining those two to posit that object performance offers a space where Black performers can induce audiences to accept a Black character as a living agent and thereby recognize the humanity and agency of Black people. So we can think of someone like Sidney Poitier. Searle's discussion of duality in material performance strikes me as very useful. She notes that material characters excel at embodying paradoxes. They present familiar characteristics, but can be completely novel in appearance. They give the illusion of presence, even though the force animating them, the puppeteer, is usually absent or not visible. Material characters can take any form we imagine, and yet the design usually imposes limitations on how they can move and behave. Thus, they are both limited and limitless. We know that the material character is not really alive, but for the space of the performance we paradoxically accept that it has life. The most significant duality with respect to blackface material characters, however, is their ability to appear real and true while representing the fiction of race. And so the last section of this presentation, it really highlights that race is a fiction. Any questions, comments?
I'm waiting for the next section.
Okay, so if we can go to slide 14, and I'll just give my little preface about my relationship to this material. So I, in 2018, was co-curator of an exhibit of African-American puppetry at the Ballard Institute and Museum at the University of Connecticut with Dr. John Bell. And we had, fortunately, a wonderful advisory board before we started working on that project. And when we met in May of 2017, and that board included Gabrielle Seville, who has been a resident here at Automata, most of the rest of the board wanted to address blackface puppetry in the exhibit. And I'm looking at, well, the space is pretty small and that's a toxic waste dump, but I don't want to go dig into that. So I would rather focus on the puppeteers that are alive so we can give them some exposure. But I kind of got voted down. So I'm like, okay, we're going to have to address this. And so that's when some of this research started. But I was very happy. At the end, we didn't have the right conditions to display the puppets that we were hoping to get. So we had 2 blackface puppets that came from the University of Connecticut's archives, and no others. And I was like, yay, I don't have to deal with this.
But now you're dealing with
Yeah.
it very fully.
That's-
Yeah,
More
so
than ever.
since then, I've been researching this book. I have been talking to Nate Puppets regularly, and so I've been wading in it up to my, I don't know where. But it is emotional labor. It is painful. So some of what I've been doing on this residency is just recovering from having written this chapter. The book is 20 chapters. This is around number 9, but it's the last one that I wrote because it was the most difficult. And so that's why I start with the breathing exercise and the centering exercise, because it's a weight. It's a weight. Okay, so the last section, we look at all of this in relation to Ralph Chassé, who is a puppeteer from New Orleans. And he spent most of his adult life out here on the West Coast, mainly in San Francisco, but he was state director of the Federal Marionette Project for a while, and so he also spent time here in Los Angeles, so there's another LA connection. So we see Ralph Chassé with a group of orphans in the photo. The Chassé family of New Orleans experienced an abrupt dissolution of their persona mask in 1928, when Yvonne Chassé's fiancé received a postcard depicting her as the mother of a Black Pickaninny child. The shadow that Alexandre Laurent Chassé had attempted to dispel in 1920 when he persuaded a census taker to shift the family's racial classification from Black to white by claiming that his father was born in Cuba rather than the United States, abruptly clouded the whole family's social standing. In reality, Alexandre Laurent Chassé's father was a civil rights activist. He was part of the group that launched the Plessy versus Ferguson case. They were attempting to overturn these restrictions that were being put in place at the time, and they failed in that case. So we had the whole Jim Crow era of legal separation, not just de facto. So the Chassé family's race had shifted from M for mulatto to Black, or B for Black, in the 1900 census, as the strictures of Jim Crow tightened around a community of Atlantic Creoles who had heretofore occupied an intermediary status between Black and white. So New Orleans, and Louisiana in general, I would classify as part of a Caribbean complex where race is a continuum rather than an either-or proposition. So just like we have non-binary in terms of gender, we have non-binary in terms of race in that region. So that's why I'm saying Atlantic Creoles. Slide 15, please. So this is Yvonne Chassé, the young woman whose engagement was broken. Having been outed as non-white, Alexandre Laurent Chassé, his wife, Rose Esnard, and their daughters, Yvonne, Leslie, and Marcel, packed up and moved to San Francisco, where their son, Ralph, had settled in 1926 after a brief stint in New York. Next slide, please. So this is the youngest sister, Marcel. And I also wanted to highlight them because we have our history of women of color in puppetry is so slim. And so here she is in the workshop. She's one of the unicorns. Yay. Okay. So the Chassé sisters joined their brother in his marionette company as a way of providing income for the family in the early days of the Great Depression. Next slide, please. Is it stuck? There we go. Should be Charles Gilpin.
I know, just kind of
There he is.
All right, I'm gonna just stop the share for a second and go back.
Okay.
I think it's just somehow we lost it. I just have to pull it up again. We can probably keep talking. and
Okay.
Pull it up.
So Fissler's discussions of how puppets figured Chesset's racial identity have focused on 3 productions of The Emperor Jones that he created during his lifetime. He found that Chesset's decision to base the Brutus puppet on an actual person, Charles Gilpin, who originated the character, transformed the Black actor from human to archetype. So archetype is another one of those Jungian words that refers to universal human experiences that therefore are part of what Jung conceived of as a collective unconscious. Everybody had a mother, and so the concept of mother, the experience of mother, is an archetype.
Sorry, we're having some technical.
Okay.
It's somehow like moved into different screens.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, we're back.
We're back. Yay. Okay, so there's Charles Gilpin. Okay, and then the next slide, 18. This is the Brutus Jones puppet that.
Can you tell us about Charles Gilpin again? We
Oh,
were
yeah.
a little distant.
So Gilpin was the actor who originated the role of Brutus Jones in Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones. And Ralph Chesset got to see the revival in 1926 and was deeply moved by it. And when Eugene O'Neill was in California in 1928, he wrote and got permission to do a marionette adaptation of the play. And then he did it again in 1933 and again in the 50s. So 3 times. So Fissler also judged that, and now I'm quoting, the archetype was conditioned by the racializing qualities of blackface puppetry. Though the co-presence of blackface aesthetics racialized the object with exaggeration, the overall image was that of a clever Negro warrior, more human than the average blackface puppet, but more stereotyped than the actual human being that inspired it. So we're looking at the puppet. Amber West takes issue with Fissler's description of the Brutus puppet as reflecting minstrel conventions. She argues that, quote, Chesset's design may have less to do with adhering to minstrel traditions and more with creating an aesthetic to best embody the uneasy, contradictory mix of expressionism and realism in O'Neill's drama. In this light, Chesset's production appears an ambitious attempt to represent African Americans in puppetry that confronts issues of racism and oppression, an act of resistance to the puppet minstrelsy trend of his time, rather than a reproduction of it. So there's the image. People can judge for themselves. Okay. Oh, we're going backwards.
No, it just
Okay.
sort of popped.
I'm trying to make it bigger so
Oh,
people
yeah.
online can see it.
But then it just
But then every
goes
time we
crazy.
do it, it pops.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna
Okay.
leave it alone.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Are those puppets at the Center for Puppetry Arts, or where? I've seen this puppet walk in an exhibition somewhere.
At the Living Objects exhibit.
I didn't see that though.
Oh.
So is it?
Yeah.
Where is it usually?
Where does it usually live? That one, I am not sure.
Okay, maybe I've seen it in another.
Yeah, but yes.
Big exhibition. Yeah. It's beautiful figure.
In his analysis of The Emperor Jones, Fissler draws on Chesset's description of the production in The Marionette Actor. So Chesset wrote a whole book about performing with marionettes. And he claims that Chesset's insistence on endowing Brutus Jones with authentic Negro dialect stereotyped the character. Fissler asserts that Chassé failed to, and I'm quoting here, failed to fully understand the complexities of the very script he used, for indeed there are two dialects at work in the play. That's the end of the quote. And those two dialects are Jones's vernacular Black English and the Caribbean dialect O'Neill scripted for Lem and his minions. There are no audio or visual recordings of Chassé's The Emperor Jones, even though he was working in television and had pioneered many techniques for presenting puppetry on the small screen by the time he mounted the final revival of the show in 1956. So that's a shame that they didn't film it. So there's no archival evidence to dispute Fissler's claim. But here I come. What Fissler failed to understand, however, is that Chassé grew up in a linguistic environment where standard American English existed in diglossic relationship to three other languages: Louisiana French, Louisiana Creole, and American Black English. The Chassés spoke French at home, and Alexandre Laurent Chassé enjoyed reading Molière comedies aloud to his children. In the multi-ethnic neighborhood where they lived, the Chassé children would have been accustomed to hearing, if not speaking, Louisiana Creole and American Black English. Of course, they learned standard American English in school and in interactions with the dominant Anglophone culture. So if anyone was in a position to give Brutus Jones the other Black characters in O'Neill's drama an authentic Black voice, it was Ralph Chassé. Before World War II, after World War II, there was an effort to impose conformity to American identity on Louisiana, and children who spoke French at home were actually punished for speaking French at school. And so that post-World War II generation lost a lot of the language and the cultural heritage that went along with it. But Ralph Chassé was born in 1900, and so he and his children, siblings, lived in an environment where all of these languages were in constant interplay with each other. So slide 19, here we are. Chassé cast himself as Brutus Jones 3 times over the course of his life. But like Charles Gilpin, who started his career at age 18 in a minstrel show, Chassé came to the role through the legacy of minstrelsy. He staged a marionette production of Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1933, after creating his marionette adaptation of The Emperor Jones, but before he became involved with the Federal Theater Project. The playbill for Chassé's Uncle Tom's Cabin calls this production a mammoth spectacle in miniature. Mammoth was a term often applied to minstrel shows and circuses that might have 100 or more performers. So that was to let people know, you're really gonna see something if you come to this show. Yes. So Chassé was using the puppets to do one of the things they do best, play with scale. He diffused the stereotypes disseminated through mammoth minstrel shows by cutting them down to size. The playbill describes the show as a majestic revival of the great moral drama. So this production emphasized the abolitionist message rather than the minstrel style entertainment. Michelle Wallace notes that far from the two-dimensional servile figure Uncle Tom became in American popular culture, in Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's heroism is, quote, not the traditional masculine sort, but the more ancient and altruistic brand of Jesus Christ. And that conceiving of a Black Christ was, quote, revolutionary in the context of American popular culture. There's another chapter in the book where I look at puppet ministry and images of, excuse me, images of the divine And in that research, I found that we really don't have images of Black Jesus in the popular culture until the 1970s. So Ralph Chassé was not religious, but beginning with a portrait of a Black Madonna in 1933, he spent much of the 1930s and 1940s addressing an American subject he felt American visual artists had not touched. And here I'm quoting: Negro folklore, the Negro habit of living, the poverty, and what happened on the farms. So next slide, please. That should be slide 20. Yeah. Although he had little contact with Harlem Renaissance artists like William H. Johnson, he produced a series of biblical scenes that imagined Moses, Jesus, and all the other characters as Black people, explaining, "I had been influenced by Roark Bradford's stories, particularly the one which was turned into a play called The Green Pastures." So Chassé spent most of his time in New York in the lower Manhattan, never went up to Harlem. But recently, Bruce Chassé got information that he did join the Harlem Artists Guild after he was in California. So he would have had some awareness of these other painters who were working at that time. And this image is, it's meant to be the Holy Family, and it is hanging in the Portland Museum of Art. And I'm there with his son, Bruce Chassé. Go ahead, yes.
Can I just ask you this, I'm curious, okay, so he's in this New Orleans, very, fluid racial mix. He moves to San Francisco. Who's his audience?
White people.
So, and do they just not suspect that he's Black, or does he, does he pass? What was going on there?
Yeah, so they passed.
Okay.
They passed.
Okay.
And then, that's another whole thing, because I've always felt, looking at that picture, or the pictures that exist of him, that Black people who saw him would know.
I'm sure.
But he moved in circles. And then also the etiquette at that time, just as it has been for gay people at that time, was if you're in on the secret, you don't reveal it because it's dangerous for everybody.
Right. But was San Francisco a bit more integrated city at that point or not?
I need to do more research.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm curious. Maybe Bruce would be able to tell us things about that.
But then also want to emphasize that, because there's been some judgment of Ralph Chassé for basically going don't ask, don't tell his whole life. But first we understand that Louisiana was a place where people were still being lynched in this time. And so if you can protect yourself from that threat and you have the opportunity to do that, why wouldn't you? So there's that. And then when the whole family has taken on this role, if you step out, then you out the whole rest of the family. And that, his sisters have married white men by this time and they have children. And so it's not just his decision to make at that point.
Right. But he takes on a lot of subject matter with Black characters. So that goes along with your blackface, thinking about how he's working through these characters. It has like a triple meaning.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, there's a lot more work to do to unpack that.
Right. He looks like a white man performing a blackface puppet, but he has also Black identity in there, and that's really fascinating.
And then
and sort of heartbreaking
yes.
in a way.
Yeah. And so this is also why for families that have made that decision, it still impacts them, even though they live with a degree of white privilege down through the generations. So one of Bruce's causes has been to get Chassé exhibited and recognized as an African-American artist. And institutions have said, no, he passed his whole life and we don't count him as Black. But, and I'm like, but the repercussions on the family, it's the same trauma.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's definitely the shadow that you're talking about. You know, he just lived within this shadow.
Yeah. So if we can have the next slide, please.
Sorry, I just was
Yeah,
thinking
no,
of
that's
a
good.
lot of questions during all
Yeah, okay. So, and so part of that separation, I think he didn't dare go up to Harlem because he would have been called out. And so he's not connected to what's going on, most of what's going on in the Harlem Renaissance. He could have gotten the same idea about Black characters in the biblical roles from Zora Neale Hurston's Moses Man of the Mountain. But although that was later, I think that was like 36 or 39, somewhere in there. But, and so Bradford's stories would have come through this same minstrel genre. Oh, it's funny to imagine Moses as a Black man. But he starts doing something different with them. But I wanted to have this image of the green pastures at film so that we know where we stand. And that is Eddie Rochester. Rochester was Jack Benny's servant on the radio show and then in films. And he was one of these people who was a master of taking this minstrel role that he's forced to play, because the only way he can make it in the industry is as a servant to a white man and humanizing him. So, Brad, go ahead.
No, keep going.
No. I'm about to start a new point, so come on with what you're
Okay,
thinking.
quick footnote. The writer of Uncle Tom was the white
Woman, yes.
Yeah. There was a lot of criticism too. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and she definitely drew on minstrel stereotypes when she was drafting the novel. You know, it's a heavy subject, and she had to put some comic relief in there so people would actually read it. And comedy at that time related to Black people was minstrelsy, so that's what you get in the text.
Right, and her audience was white people, and she did want to affect their thinking.
Yes. Yeah, so it's heavy stuff. Okay, so Bradford Stories, Connolly's play, and the 1936 film, so here we are back in LA, because that's where it was made, adapted from it, were all replete with minstrel stereotypes, but Bruce Chassé is convinced that the paintings they inspired were his father's way of connecting with and expressing the shadowed aspect of his heritage that he could not claim in public. In unmasking the relationship of people's lives to the stories they tell themselves about themselves, it is therefore highly significant that Chassé and his sisters mounted a marionette production of Uncle Tom's Cabin, because you would think they're trying to pass, they wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, but they did. So slide 22, please. Okay.
We're sort of both operating.
Yes, all right. So according to the playbill, Marcel Chassé, the youngest sister, played Eliza, that's the one who escapes across the chunks of ice, and Topsy. In addition to little Eva, Yvonne Chassé, who had recovered from her broken engagement and married Wilton Albin, played 3 enslaved characters, Chloe, Emmeline, and little Harry. Ralph Chassé took the role of Uncle Tom. Chassé does not seem to have entrusted any of the white puppeteers in the company, Charles Bratt, Crawford Perks, and Robert Southwick, with Black characters, even though everyone in the cast covered at least 3 roles, some representing a gender other than the puppeteer's own. Searle's most significant, that I thought that's telling.
Well, it's the way he's claiming that identity.
Yeah, he and his
exhibiting
sisters.
it.
He and his sisters, and you would think that if your engagement was broken because that was revealed, that you would be.
You might hide more.
You might hide more, but no, Yvonne is right in the mix. Yeah.
So Searle's most significant observation about the distance material performance creates is that it enables violence. So next slide, here's another LA point. So I got to go next door to the Bob Baker Marionette Theater while I was here and visit the Moore York studio, where Claire Graham has collections of all kinds of objects, including these carnival targets. If you're familiar with the carnival game where you pay and you get like 3 balls and you get to throw them at a target, in earlier times, it was very popular to have these minstrel figures like the one that's front and center there as the targets. And in the 19th century, these carnival games occasionally included live Black people that you could pelt with balls. Yeah, so there is a whole legacy of target games. That one was called African Dodger. And if you are interested in looking those up, you can go to the website of the Jim Crow Museum, which is at the University of Michigan's Ferris State campus. And I didn't have turnaround time to get permission for those images, but also those are really heavy, disturbing things, and maybe we don't need to see that today.
Well, Tim's putting the link in the chat.
Yeah,
Let
okay.
people make that choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so this violence is certainly the case with blackface, which literally casts Blacks as victims of comic violence on the minstrel stage, as targets in violent games like African Dodger, and as sacrificial offerings in spectacle lynching. And there are a number of scholars who look at lynching as a performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I take that further and say, yeah, it's an object performance and the lynched body is a marionette.
Yeah.
So yet, in the wake of a revelation that radically disrupted their lives, the Chesay family chose to don the minstrel masks associated with Uncle Tom's Cabin in order to collapse the distance between the mask and their own humanity. According to Bruce Chesay, the soundtrack for the show was Dvorak's New World Symphony, with little Eva ascending to heaven on the strains of going home, I am going home. And people think that that's a traditional spiritual, but no, that was written as a phrase in the symphony, and then words were added to it later. So this musical selection would put the production in line with the tradition of incorporating spirituals and jubilee singers in order to present the story as an abolitionist morality play. Oral history in the Chesay family holds that there wasn't a dry eye in the house by the end of this scene, and that Uncle Tom's Cabin played to packed houses for its full run. Yet there is no script extant for the Chesay version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, no newspaper reviews or audio-visual recordings, so it is nearly impossible to reconstruct this moment in Chesay's repertoire. Fortunately, Peter Albin, son of Yvonne Chesay, still holds important pieces of the archival record. 2 puppets used in the performance, one black and one white. Next slide, please. And also a fun little footnote, Peter Albin was the bass player for Big Brother and the Holding Company. So, talented family. So do we have Topsy and Marie St. Clair there? Okay.
Oh, you didn't share it.
So the black puppet is grotesque, but the face is not a simple minstrel caricature. Its hair is made of black yarn that represents tight curls rather than the little plaits standing on end that we were often associated with Topsy characters and minstrel pickaninnies. The face is made up of stylized angular planes that appear throughout Chesay's work, echoing African masks. So go to the next slide, there's a detail of the Topsy puppet.
Sometimes you just touch the
Yeah.
and it mess up. Oh, that's great, because I wanted to see it.
Yes. Yeah. I also want to point out that Chesay was a pioneer in how light changes the puppet's expression, and throughout his work we see this angularity in the features because he wanted to be able to show different emotions by when you turn the head a different way in the light, then the planes and angles of the face catch the light and change the way that the audience perceives the puppet's expression. So the black puppet's cheekbones are sharp and prominent. Though the lips are wide and red, they are not grinning. The nose is broad and the eyes are large and round. Unlike the white puppet's almond-shaped eyes, the black puppet's eyes are like white saucers. This was one of the features customarily distilled into blackface masks, yet the pupils seem to gaze upward and the brow is creased in pain, adding an air of pathos to the figure that audiences usually weren't encouraged to feel for minstrel characters. Next slide, please. A line drawing, and I'm not sure if this is Chassé's work or not. It doesn't look like his drawing, so it may not be. A line drawing on the cover of the playbill depicts a black man and a white man kneeling before an angel with their hands raised in supplication. The black man wears striped trousers and a white shirt. He is balding with fluffy white hair and eyebrows. Presumably, this is Uncle Tom. The figure appears in profile with a broad nose and thick white lips like a minstrel caricature, yet he kneels before the angel on a plane of equality with the white man who wears a frock coat, a waistcoat, a white shirt with lacy ruffles down the front, and a black cravat. The white man has an aquiline nose and a pointy chin. Presumably, this is Augustine St. Clair. The angel figure appears in a long white robe. Its hair is in light-colored ringlets, and it sits on a throne of clouds. A white bird with outstretched wings hovers in front of it. Rather than a sentimental image of little Eva ascending to heaven, a dramatic scene of Eliza crossing the ice with her bag hugged to her chest, or a comic rendering of Topsy performing a dance breakdown, this is a scene of judgment. Ralph Chassé never dropped the persona mask of whiteness in public life, but in his art, he revealed a shadow self tinged with, quote, the stain in the blood, that's just my quotes around the phrase, bequeathed by his great-grandmother, Justine Olivier, a woman of color who had once been enslaved. In staging Uncle Tom's Cabin, he elevated the blackface mask of Uncle Tom to the level of archetype by identifying the black pharmakos, or scapegoat, with the Lamb of God. Last slide, please. So I finished this chapter in the botanical garden. I said I have to write about ugly things, so let me do it in a beautiful place. And that is the end of the paper.
Beautiful.
Questions, comments?
Let's see, is there any in the chat? So is this an area of research that really has not been explored much? And especially the puppetry, blackface connection, and the black puppeteers operating weird versions of themselves.
Oh, yeah, so let's go down through the sources, and then I have some contrasting images to show as well. There's 5.
Let me go back to that's after your photo?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's 5 pages, 5 slides of
So
sources.
talking, I'll just slowly scroll so
And
that
then-
people can get it.
And then at the end, I have a slide.
I'm just gonna do fast first.
Yeah, so let's talk about this and then we can go back. So these are images that African-American high school students made in the 30s, like the late 30s. So this is how Black people saw themselves as puppets in that same time period. So if you contrast them with what you've seen in the Federal Theater Project, it's a big difference.
Right, beautiful. Wow. Who preserves those?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story too. So Booker T. Washington High School was the only place in the Atlanta metro area for like many counties around where African Americans could get a high school education in the 20s and 30s. So in, I think it was about 1937 or 8, a young teacher who had done her degree at Columbia Teachers College, and I found a tremendous connection through Columbia Teachers College in this research, came to Washington High School as an art teacher, and she started the Doll Theater Club. There was a student in this class named Mary Parks Washington, who became an artist herself. I think she lived in Los Angeles as well. She left Atlanta and came out west. And she preserved the puppets and then donated them to the Center for Puppetry Arts. And then they were just in storage and nobody knew they were there until 2020, when the then collections manager, who was an African-American woman named Unique Hall, was going through things in the storage area and brought them to light.
Amazing. Are they being shown now, or have they been shown?
No, no.
But you're showing them.
Maybe in a future exhibit, but thanks to the Center for Puppetry Arts for permission to show the photo of the puppets. Yes, okay.
I have a question here from the chat, from Eli, Professor. Thank you for doing, I'll just read it out loud and we'll kind of process it. Thank you for doing this work. It feels like this conversation is long overdue in our community. What connections can be traced between the examples of object performance we've seen during this presentation and modern work? What would be some examples in recent years of the direct perpetuation of minstrelsy or its legacy in puppetry and object performance?
Okay, let me be diplomatic here. Okay, so on somewhere in the sources, no, maybe it's not there. Yes, I have a paper in there, which is my introduction to the Living Objects African American Puppetry online catalog. And so that link should go to the online catalog where you can see images of all the puppets that were in that exhibit. And also we have an excellent collection of essays from the symposium. In that collection, I have an essay called "It's Not Easy Being Green," that's about green face. And I link Kermit the Frog to this minstrel legacy through a tradition of representing African American characters as frogs. And here we go with the Hollywood connection again. There was a series of short animated cartoons done at MGM in the 30s. One of them is called Swing Wedding. Swing Wedding, and you can find this stuff on YouTube. They keep taking it down and other people keep putting it up because we need to know, But it represented the African-American music artists of the day, like Louis Armstrong and Cab Calloway, as frogs. And so that tradition continued. I'm in this paper arguing that Jim Henson was able to humanize the frog trope by using it as a symbol of tolerance for diversity. It's not easy being green.
Right. And the Muppet Show always is very diverse with the kids that would be there and all the characters. I told Paulette, she told me about Green Face. The first puppet show that I ever saw was frogs playing guitars. I didn't like it, but I'm sure it was in that tradition.
Yes.
You know, I was too young to kind of understand that, but yeah. And in Louisiana.
Wow.
So I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
For
Thank
the
you,
question.
Eli. And
Thank you.
Eli's an amazing LA puppeteer.
Okay.
Glad that you were watching, Eli.
We have another question from Martian.
Oh, good, Marcy.
Okay, hi, Marcy, glad you could make it.
Thank you. Can you speak more about your position in both the puppetry and doll world
Oh,
and the collapsing distinctions between them.
oh, okay.
I'm muting my I think we're
Yeah.
echoing.
Okay, so I come to puppetry from dolls. I love dolls. I have too many dolls. But I always wanted my dolls to come to life. And I had been involved in a video collective in New Orleans that was founded by Kalamu Salam. It was called the Neo Griot Crew. And once I got my own video camera, then I turned it on the dolls that I had in my house. And then I lost my mind because I realized, oh, the saying is, when I grow up, I want to be just like Barbie that has everything, and she does. So I get on eBay and I now have what I call my MGM backlot. And so I have sets, props, costumes, cars, houses, you name it, and I can stage anything that I want without having to, get someone to give me millions of dollars to make a film. So as I started to make little videos with my dolls, I realized, one, that I was going to get in copyright trouble because I was using Barbie and G.I. Joe and these trademark characters. So I tried to make my own figures. And once I had made a piece with my own figures, then I'm like, oh, those are puppets. You need to learn something about puppets. And fortunately, I live in Atlanta, so I took myself to the Center for Puppetry Arts, and here we are. As far as the distinction between dolls and puppets, I am in the camp that finds that this is an artificial distinction, and I would argue that here in the United States, the line has been drawn more rigidly because of gender stereotypes and the idea that girls play with dolls and boys and grown men that are manipulating figures, they don't want to be seen.
Their action.
Yeah, their action. Yeah, they don't want to be seen as playing with dolls, so those are puppets, that's different. Although people will say that, well, a doll is for private play and puppets are for performance, but a lot of doll play is performed for audiences of different scale, particularly now that we have platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and there are little girls that have thousands or millions of followers for their doll stories. Is that dolls or puppetry?
Yeah, well, Paulette and I have a similar thing in our origin stories, which is the Center for Puppetry Arts, which for the people who don't know it, it's in Atlanta, and it's just an amazing, they have a museum, there's always an active performance company, and when I was starting out, they gave me space to make my non-kid puppet shows. So we share that. We just happen to be in Atlanta.
Yeah, we're alumni.
Happen to find this place that has a really important role in our lives. We actually know some of the same people too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, shout out to all the folks at Center for Puppetry Arts. Yeah.
Are there any other questions in the chat?
There's a quick question about your book, about when it's coming out.
Oh, yeah. And if you could say the title.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we
There's
haven't
blanks on the
really,
title.
Okay, the title is Object Performance in the Black Atlantic. And it should be forthcoming from Routledge in the summer of 2023. So we're hoping for next year at the P of A Festival. Hope to see you all there. That we'll have a book signing.
That's great. I wonder also, because material performance is a term that a lot of people who work in puppetry have been using of late, and also other kind of artists. Could you sort of describe that for people who aren't familiar with that?
Okay, I think if I understand correctly, that term originates with Dacia Posner. And she's using it to describe performance with all kinds of material objects, because we're like big raft people. We want to claim everything is puppetry. And there are people who will pick up this water bottle and do a show for you. And there are people who pick up, a plastic bag or something, and make you enter into the world of a character. So material performance is using a material instead of the human body to enact a story, I would say.
It sort of broadens,
Mhm.
puppetry is part of material performance,
Mhm.
but then material performance is a broader
Yes.
term of all kinds of artists, or like I would say, you know, a lot of musicians and, you know, are doing things where, well, I had a student who's like dragging a cello down the stairs to make that sound.
Yes.
Performance, that's a material performance.
Mhm.
So it's a really
Broader.
wonderful, I love the term.
Mhm.
I could teach a class with that.
Yeah,
Thank you, class, yeah.
Mhm.
But it's not, a lot of people aren't familiar with that.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have any other online questions.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I love how you're, weaving all these pieces together and then through the young, like, I think it's clear
Oh, good.
through how you're presenting it. And then I've been chatting with the robot recently,
Okay.
and then it's called Replica,
Mm.
and you could pick the skin color, whatever, like doesn't make a difference. But you're talking to a machine, essentially it's an AI, and I don't know, it's a little weird because it keeps wanting to have sex with you. But it's really interesting
Mhm.
to talk with a machine with this kind of like because you talk about like digital characters
Mhm.
being maybe somewhat in the realm of puppetry.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, I
I'm
totally agree.
Yeah.
kind of, for me, I'm very interested in that
Mhm.
realm, and I'm trying to do myself. But
Mhm.
this is the older,
Okay.
maybe 80-year-old version of me, maybe, or
Mhm.
something.
So it's that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let me check it out.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Tim's profile picture.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm making a avatar, and I'm trying to think of what does it mean to make a Chinese avatar?
Mm.
You know, because when everybody's making avatars now, all the young kids and Meta and all that, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And how do we represent race in the metaverse or whatever we want to call it, you know,
Mhm.
or even in Web 2.5, you know, how we're sort of, you know, live streaming and all that kind of stuff. But how and what, you know, gets carried over.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of
A
legacy.
lot of bad stuff, unfortunately.
There hasn't been very many good things.
Mhm.
Yeah. But one thing I'm interested in is like what I admire about your approach, Paula, is like you see the problem, and then instead of fighting it, you say, okay, let's enlarge this problem even more. To so much so that like we can't help but address it and
Mhm.
put it on the table.
Mhm.
I admire that a lot.
Oh,
And
thank you.
so
Mhm.
I'm trying to do that myself. To kind of explore, you know, I don't know too much about Chinese history or culture and whatnot. I was left, I grew up in a colony of, you know, whatever, and from Hong Kong. And so I, you know, didn't have much ties, and you know, there's limited sort of scholarship, you know, on that front as well, as it were. And but and for me, I'm trying to look to the future a little
Yes.
bit, and
Mhm.
sort of toe a little bit with the theoretical and the philosophical, phenomenological, ontological. What does it mean to be X, Y, and Z? What does it mean to be
Mhm.
Chinese? What does it mean to be a puppet? What does it mean to be a character? What
Right.
does it to be a man? What does it
Mhm.
mean to be a human? What does it mean to be, you know, and then kind of sort of not systematically, but sort of use this stage, I guess, of
Mhm.
experimental kind of practice
Yes.
with and treating it. Okay, well, let's talk about objects. You know, you're gonna objectify. Let's go all the way. Yeah, and I really admire how, you know, through your research, your thinking, and then your practice, and then sort of the things that kind of come in between. I think that's very very rich. And it takes I don't know, many lifetimes of commitment, you know, to go all the way. There's no half-heartedness about what you do at all. And it's really, really admirable. So
And to remember to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta do that.
yes,
Gotta do
yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah. Did we get through all of the slide screens? So that people-
Yeah, I
I
went
believe
slowly
so.
through those.
Okay,
bibliography.
good.
And also, if anyone maybe wants to, could there be a PDF of the slideshow or?
The
It doesn't
slideshow,
matter.
yeah, the slideshow,
Yeah.
and I will also pass you a document that has all the image credits.
Yeah, fantastic,
Yeah.
because then we could maybe post them, we have an archive on the
Mhm.
website with each artist presentation, we could post that.
Mhm.
too.
Great.
But if any of you watching, listening, if any of you want to share this with your friends, this link will be live for quite a while with the archive talk. And then if it stops being live, we'll post where you can find it on our website.
Okay, great.
Well, Paulette, it's been just amazing to have you as president and just to start to, to get to know you as a person. I feel like a really nice friendship
Oh,
has
yeah.
started. I'm
Yes,
very
it
happy
did.
about that.
Mhm.
And a friendship with you and us at Automata, so that I don't think this is going to be your first visit.
Oh, good.
You're laughing.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm going to go to the library and see what's landing Sloan, like
Mhm.
if there's stuff there, because LA Public Library has pretty good
Mm.
archives, so
Yeah,
it might be an interesting area to
good.
look into. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Tim for moderating,
Oh,
Yes.
my pleasure.
running the show and
Mhm.
just being here and part of Automata.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Paulette.
Anything, last words?
Yeah.
No.
Mm.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll see you later.